Come to Mallorca, they said. Beach holiday? Ride your bike in the sunshine? They obviously didn't look at the April forecast, did they? Spring's out the way anyway. The classics are done. The stage racing's on the way. And on the Gruppetto this week, my travels are over. I've had Adam Blythe with me. L Alvarez will be talking about the Vuelta Femenina. And we'll be looking forward from the classics to the Giro D'Italia. Well, there's lots of talking to be done before this week's time limit, so let's get on with it and begin with our usual recap of everything that's happened over the last week. It began at the Tour of the Alps, which has become increasingly important since its renaming from the old Giro del Trentino and the changing ways in which big GC stars approach the first Grand Tour of the year. That meant that Geraint Thomas would be racing with his Ineos Grenadiers after a period at altitude and on their way to the Giro d'Italia. It was his teammate Tobias Foss, however, who took the opening stage and the leader's green jersey, his first ever international pro win away from time trialling. The bunch then moved over to Austria on day two, when Alessandro De Marchi won from a breakaway, proving that it's not all about the young guns in modern cycling. The 37-year-old reacquainting himself and his team with his success. It had been over 2 years for the rider and a couple of months since Jaco Alula's great start to the season stalled a little. Back on track, as were the rest of the peloton on day three, although they might have wished they'd have stayed at home. The coldest, wettest, most miserable day's racing around the Tyrolese town of Schwaz was won by Juan Pedro Lopez. His prize for a first ever victory and taking over half a minute on the main bunch was the leader's jersey, green the perfect colour for a passionate Andalusian and a Real Betis supporter. As the peloton returned to Italian territory, the 26-year-old Spaniard would be put under pressure by several teams. Decathlon Agir Desert, Bahrain Victorious, and DSM Firmenich Postenel, the main agitators on the GC, as Juanpe survived the fourth day and Simon Carr made it 2 stage wins at this race in as many years, this time the EF Education Easy Postman with a 45-kilometre solo. Now, on the same day, Chris Harper crashed out in worrying fashion. More on that later with Adam. The racing concluded with another mountainous stage. It was the Tour of the Alps, after all. Starting and finishing in Levico Terme, and after attacks from Thomas, Tiberi, Pouls, Pellizzari and others, Lopez looked after his lead brilliantly, seeing Aurélien Paré-Peintre take a deserved stage win for Decathlon, while he celebrated behind, taking his maiden GC success. While all of that was going on high up in the mountains, the ups and downs of Wallonia looked like the Welsh hills on Wednesday when Stevie Williams won one of the most dramatic editions of Flèche Wallonne in recent memory. The cold and rain played so much of a part that in several cases entire teams of riders failed to finish. But the Welsh star took the biggest one-day win of his career, beating Vauquelin and Van Gils to the line on the Mur d'Oui. Later on that same day, there was a sensational story on the same beastly slope of a finish. Katarzyna Niewiadoma put an end to all of those nearly moments, the seconds, the thirds, and the what might have beens, taking her first road win in almost 5 calendar years. One of the top riders in the world, already a winner of some of the sport's biggest prizes, and a world champion on the gravel, the Canyon SRAM star from Poland got the better of Demi Follering and Elisa Longo-Borghini. It was her team's first victory of the season. Niewiadoma would again be in the mix in Liège just 4 days later. Just over 150 kilometres and some of the most famous hills in cycling to be taken on. Elise Chabet, Kim Kadzo and Grace Brown were at the front over the most famous of them all, the Côte de la Redoute. The peloton was still way behind at this point, but with Follering, Longo-Borghini and Niewiadoma again starting to mount attacks behind, the gap was tumbling, heading on to the last of the big climbs. It was inside the final 10 kilometres that the two trios merged. And then a slick section on a roundabout almost meant that Brown would be out of the game. But she recovered well, returning to the group as they played games ahead. Those games continued well into the final kilometre, with Wednesday's winner attacking into the finish straight. But there'd be no Ardennes double, as Brown found Longo-Borghini's wheel, and then came around it to refine her own form, and after a spring to forget, winning for FDJ Suez. Super stuff from the 31-year-old Australian. The men's race had been billed as a POG versus MVDP showdown. Tadej Pogačar coming down from altitude, Mathieu van der Poel aiming to become only the second man ever to win 3 monuments in a season. A crash looked like it would condition the race, with the world champion, one of many caught behind it, going into the final 100 kilometres. Just when it looked like Tom Pidcock, Van der Poel and others would miss out because of it, they managed to get back on, some spending more energy to do so than others. The bulk of that spent energy, however, was being used to great effect at the front by UAE Emirates. One by one, climb by climb, their stellar outfit worked to numb the legs of everyone except their Galactico leader. When the moment came, it was predictable, but still incredibly impressive. Just under 35 kilometres remained when relatively early on La Redoute, Pogačar accelerated away. Richard Carapaz was the closest to being able to follow, but the gap grew and soon ballooned, with the rest, once again, fighting for the scraps. A familiar story this spring, whoever's been at the front. Romain Bardet, the Frenchman, made sure that second would be his. Van der Poel won the sprint for third, which was his best ever Liège result from 2 appearances. But all the attention was on Pogačar. The Slovenian dedicated the win to his late mother-in-law, who passed away on the same day 2 years ago. For the 25-year-old winner, the numbers are astounding. A second Liège, a 6th monument, a 7th win in 10 days of 2024 racing, and a 70th career success in total. Well, whilst Tadej's off to take aim at the Giro D'Italia coming up, I dialed Adam Blythe to have a chat. Surprisingly picked up the phone, given the fact he'd spent 6 days previously with me. Thankfully he did. This was the chat. Well, we're just in another brilliant race in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, won by Tadej Pogačar, Van der Poel on the podium as well. And Adam, I think we knew what was coming, didn't we, throughout that day?
I think well, that's the thing. Everyone knew what was coming, didn't they? Within the whole bike race, all the riders knew what was going to happen. And that's what makes it so impressive for me. You know, Pogačar doing what he was able to do. That was the first attack we had from the Peloton, and it was Pogačar's attack. And it was the only one he had to do. I mean, he is an incredible rider. We all know how good he is, but it's just that no one can respond to it. You know, it's like playing poker and telling everyone your cards, but still winning. He is incredible.
Looking forward to the Giro d'Italia. The rest of the peloton will be running scared, won't they? Because 10 race days for Pogačar, 7 wins. I mean, have we seen this sort of thing? I mean, okay, we can always go back to Merckx and people like that, but recent years we've not seen things like this, have we?
No, I can't remember the last time we've seen someone as dominant like this, you know, and it's, like I said, he announces what he's going to do. Strada Bianca. It's pretty obvious today that he was going to attack on La Redoute right from the bottom as well, let's not forget. We've not seen a rider go from right from the bottom of La Redoute before like Pogačar did, which is incredible on its own. But looking at the Giro, you heard Romain Bardet say just before they went on the podium today, and he said, now we've got Italy in. You could tell he was a little bit like, oh, God, the Giro is going to be fun. And Pogačar went, yeah, it'll be fun. Come on, it'll be fun. And it's like, yeah, fun for you. But that was about it, really. So I think for Pogačar, you know, I just, what must be going through his head in terms of winning the overall, but there must become a point within this Giro is like, I am going to try and clean up here. I am going to try and win as much as I possibly can. And that I'm looking forward to. I think it's Pataki that's got the record for 9 or 11 stage wins in one Giro d'Italia. Wouldn't surprise me the way that Pogačar's going if he was able to 5, possibly 6, maybe the GC as well, which I think if we look at it that way, you can see how dominant he is, and they're not sprint stages like Pataki's either. So yeah, I'm excited for it. I just hope that he doesn't take too much time early on, and you know what I mean. For us watching at home, we want to have a race on our hands, and there is the possibility of Pogačar blowing up like he has done in the Tour. So maybe let's hope for that in the nicest possible way.
Well, you can watch that race live with us. It'll be live in Europe on Eurosport and Discovery Plus, and your US viewers will also be able to see it on Max as well, don't forget. Before you leave us though, Adam, I want to go back and talk about a race that we commentated together earlier this week, Tour of the Alps, and it was a hotly contested race, pretty bad conditions, but we saw a few pretty nasty crashes, the worst involving Chris Harper, then Ben O'Connor. Thankfully, Chris Harper got away with a light concussion, they described it as, so a bit of rest and recuperation. He was well enough to send everybody a nice well-wishing message, well-wishing to his well-wishers, wasn't he? He was saying thanks to everybody who'd sent him messages himself. So good to see that Jayco Alula's Chris Harper is okay. He was racing really well, but the way he went down and a couple of other things we noticed at the race, a couple of sketchy-looking finishes, things like that. Is the message on safety getting through beyond World Tour racing at the minute?
I'd say it's getting through, but doing things about it, maybe not so much. That crash of Chris Harper, for me, it was down to poor marshalling. There was a curve that was the same colour as the tarmac. All of a sudden, that road was half as wide as it was with a curb on the outside, and that's how he came a cropper. Just not having that room that he thought he had because there was a curb in the way. Luckily, he's all right, as you said, but I definitely think that's a simple marshal. They've got marshals on corners to stop cars coming out, this, that and the other. They didn't put a marshal on a roundabout on a very dangerous corner where the riders are going 60, 70 k's an hour. And it's disappointing for one. I think, rider safety is the most important thing if you're organising a bike race. So I definitely think there's a lot to be done in terms of rider safety in the smaller races. But we have to remember that, to give the organisers due respect, is that they're doing everything they can. They're putting on races with a lot less money. They're doing everything they can to get it on air to the TV. They're getting the big riders in as much as they can. They're creating the route. So not everything is going to be perfect. But if I was to request one thing that can be as close to perfect as possible, it's everything around rider safety. The rest, it's irrelevant. You'd rather have all the riders coming across the line as safely as they can without just the normal accidents, obviously, of bike racing, but without accidents that shouldn't happen, really.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go to the UCI, actually, just before the start of the season with a few of our colleagues, and one of the seminars and lectures we had at this sort of commentators conference was about safety.
Don't say that. Don't say
there might have been a little bit of that involved. Everybody defending their interests, of course, as they would. But I know that it's something to give them their dues as well. The UCI do know is an issue. I did, however, get the feeling that maybe outside the World Tour, people aren't looking at impressing that on hard enough. And, I got the impression that maybe we could have, World Tour races are safe, but the other races are the other races. No, I think every professional bike race you hold has to be held to the same safety standard, surely. And if that's a money thing, Adam, do you think maybe that a pot should be put aside, whether it comes from, money that's made by the federation, whether it comes from the riders' union, whatever? We could argue all day and all night, I'm sure, about where to get that from and the way to put it in place. But should there maybe sort of a bit of a pot of gold that's shed around the second and third division races, maybe, that does help it be spent on enough people to marshal the corners, for example, somebody going over and checking the route and things like that?
I think so. The routes are already checked, aren't they? So everyone, each and every stage race, let's say if it's a smaller race, they've always got someone doing a recon of the routes and they highlight the points. Well, that's how they make it beautiful. That's how they make it entertaining for us watching at home. So they know the routes, they know the corners, they know the dangerous points of what they see. And I think if you're organising a race, there should be, they get funding for the race, they get sponsors for the races, everything along with it. There should be a certain amount minimum that is sent on rider safety. If you look at, if you go around the corner here and wherever you live, there's always a local 5k or a 10k or a triathlon going along or a local time trial, whatever it is. They're just marshals. They're not paid. They're just there to do a job. And I'm sure that it's not too difficult, I can imagine, to come and be a marshal at a World Tour race, or not even a World Tour race, any race, to look after rider safety. So I think in terms of putting a marshal down, it's no issue for me whatsoever. That shouldn't be an issue. I think when you bring barriers into it, a certain barrier, yes, that is completely different because it costs so much more money and transportation, etc. of that. But I definitely think, there should be a minimum ruling of safety, and that goes across all boards, not just the bigger races, not just the World Tour races, but the smaller races as well, 100%. It can't just be you forget about the smaller races because they're not World Tour. A lot of the World Tour rider goes to the smaller races to prepare for the bigger races. And if you want the bigger riders at the bigger races, look after them in the smaller races as well, because otherwise they might not turn up because of crashes like Chris Harper's.
Yeah, and this isn't us having a go at the organisers of the Tour of the Alps. I have to say, in their favour, and I did a bit of digging around, speaking to a couple of sports directors and riders in and after the race. Also, you and I had the road book in front of us as well. To be fair, to the tour, the organiser of the Tour of the Alps. They're one of the few organisers who have these big, I forget the phrase they use, but they have a phrase, don't they, like danger point. And they've got photographs of all the points where you have to be extra careful. And that's in the race manual. So they are making an effort. I mean, I say 10 out of 10 for effort. However, you still feel that somebody should be checking everything to the nth degree. There should be a minimum standard. And maybe that's something that we can throw now to this new organisation, Safer, that's being set up. We heard a couple of the big teams talking about it, and you know, an appeal from us as people who want to watch safe racing. We've got friends who ride their bikes in the pro peloton. You know, a lot of people listening to this will have family and friends as well, and whoever. We know that you're all passionate fans watching too. We want minimum standards, and that is something I think that we'd probably like this new group to have a look at, and together with the UCI implement whatever the level of the race.
I think that's it. I think minimum standards. I think, as you just mentioned there's all the things in the road book around it for everyone to get as much information as they can from everything, you know, from the road the races are riding on. But you have to remember these road books are built out through when the turning points are the caution points. But that's when they're driving on open roads. They're not descending like they're on a closed road, you know, as fast as they possibly can in a car. That's what the riders are doing on the bikes. The cars can't go around the corners as fast as the bikes do. So I think, like we're talking about Chris Harper's incident, they might have looked at that, they've come into that roundabout, they've looked at it from a certain angle, they won't come that fast into there. Then all of a sudden, you're doing 70k an hour into it, and this curb's shot up out of nowhere. There is a little bit of a point, like I just said, where sometimes you might not see things, and then when something does happen, like with Chris Harper, like, oh, it's obvious. So it is a difficult one, but I think for minimum standards, there should be a case of this is how it has to be, this is what you need to have, this is what you need to do before that. Before you even go into putting the race on, you need to assure everyone that these standards are in place, they are guaranteed, and then you can look at putting the race on. Because unless that happens, I don't want, like, if I was a bike rider now and all these things weren't in place, you'd be like, well, if that's not guaranteed, I don't want to do it. It's like saying, oh, you know, helmets aren't necessary today. It's like, well, I'm not going to race. If you can't, like, guarantee our safety as much as you possibly can, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't go on a roller coaster, would you? Oh, I think that's safe.
Well, after chatting to Adam, I still had a few euros to spare in the phone box down here on the beach. So I decided that with the Vuelta A Espana Femenina coming up, it was probably a good time to place a call to Eurosport Spain and to their expert, Laura Alvarez. Well, we've just seen the finish of Liège-Bastogne-Liège women. It's a Sunday evening, and I'm speaking to the Spanish Eurosport commentator, Laura Alvarez. Laura, you've just been commentating the race yourself. How did it go for you? How did you see it? What a race.
Hi, Rob. Hi, everyone. It was an exciting race, an exciting finish in Liège-Bastogne-Liège with the victory of Grace Brown for FDE. And I'm very happy for her because I think that they deserve a victory. Since the last weeks, we saw a very strong FDE. So I think that they need and they deserve this victory to get the motivation for the next weeks. And Grace Brown is a great rider to win because she was second in two editions of the Liège. And finally, she gets this victory. And hopefully they get this motivation, this special feeling for the Vuelta a España, for Itzulia, Vuelta Burgos. They are a very strong team, and they did a great job today.
Well, the classics are over. You just mentioned one race that's coming up. That's the first Grand Tour of the year, the Vuelta a España. You're going to be commentating on it. You're sat in Madrid in the Eurosport Spain studios. That's where the race finishes. But where does it start, and what's the route like this year?
The race starts in Valencia, and I think that one of the signals of the Vuelta is the TTT for the first day, and I don't think we are going to see big difference between the teams. I think that is the first test for the teams in this Sunday's stage, but the race is going to be a little tough with the tactics because the route is very open for a lot of riders, for a lot of type of riders, and I think that we are not going to see big gaps in the GC the last days. We are going to see a very close GC until the last day. That it's one hard stage in Madrid. We start in the Distrito Telefónica. That is the 100th anniversary for the company, and this is a special day. We finally go to Navacerrada, one of the most famous finishes in La Vuelta, in the men's Vuelta. So I think we are going to see a big battle for the GC, but with a lot of tactics in the tricky stages they have to road.
It's not always the route that makes the racing, but how they race it that makes the racing. And maybe it's a blank canvas for people to attack. Not quite the same finish as the one in your home region in Asturias last year with Lagos de Covadonga. In terms of that then, who are we looking at? Which riders do we think can win the Vuelta this year?
I think that there are three names very important in this battle of the GC. First of all, Demi Vollering. She didn't win in the last weeks in the Spring Classic, so she has to put her efforts in the race in Vuelta. She lost the GC last year in Lagos de Covadonga. It was a great battle too, but I think that she has the opportunity to win the red jersey. I think that Elisa Longo-Borghini is going to be one of her big rivals, and also Kasia Neviaroma. She is always in the battle. She is always there, and I think that these three names are the most important ones. But there are others that we have to look at, like Gaia Realini, maybe Me Fisher-Black, or even or Julia Labou too. So I think we have several names, but these three are the most important, seeing the last races of the past weeks of the Spring Classics.
I'm glad you mentioned Gaia Realini. She was one of the riders who really impressed me the most last year. A really exciting rider to watch. Neviaroma as well, lives in Spain, doesn't she, in Catalonia, so that would be a very, very good story. So we've seen the protagonists, we know the route. When does it start, Laura?
La Vuelta starts in Sunday, 28th. So we have a very big excitement here in Eurosport Spain to put to the world that the women's cycling is very exciting this year, that we don't have the dominance of FD Worlds of last year of 2023. So we are seeing like very exciting races, a lot of riders, a lot of surprises. So I think that it's going to be a very exciting race, a very exciting battle for the GC.
Well, it's going to be a really exciting race. We wish you all the best of luck on the commentary, Laura, and we look forward to watching it with you all. It'll be live on Eurosport and Discovery+. This week we've also got the Tour de Romandie, a race that takes place in the French-speaking area of Switzerland. Lots of Tour de France people having a look at each other, maybe before another altitude stint coming up in May. And one of the most gorgeous corners of the Mediterranean and the Aegean on show in Turkey. Their national tour goes all the way to Istanbul at the weekend. Each and every stage of those races are live on Eurosport and Discovery+. And remember, if you have to miss anything, realise you've got other lives and things to do as well. There is Discovery+ on demand. Well, I'm off to do my last little bit of Giro homework. I'm going to pray for some sunshine to come out, game of beach volleyball, maybe even a bike ride. And I'll be seeing you soon for the Giro D'Italia. Goodbye.